goodies and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicverse. Welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern if you think that we can make our world better by making our companies better. I got a real treat for you today. We are talking about data storytelling, harmonizing metrics, ethics, and engagement with the one and only, round of applause, big Ethico welcome, big Ethicsverse welcome to the one and only Dr. Joe Perez. So I don't know if you guys have met Joe or seen him. I've seen him at a couple of conferences. Every talk I've ever been to with him has been like the best one I've seen at the conference. He's like consistently rated among the top speakers at SCCE and others. So we'll tell you some more about him in a minute, but you know, storytelling, marrying that with data is so much of the name of the game right now, right? We have to be able to show our worth. We have to be able to convey that in a compelling way to retain that attention. And so people can understand where we're at in our compliance journey. We're going to be diving in to that today. The Ethicsverse survey is still live. We would love some feedback for you from you. So please go ahead and fill that out. As I'm going through the announcements here, go ahead and click this link and fill it out. Also drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. Like we say every week, your network is your net worth. Neither are big enough. So reach out and take advantage of this community that we're all a part of. And I guarantee whatever you're struggling with, there's somebody on this call today who has recently solved that. And it's up to you to reach out and get that help and take advantage of this really unique asset that we have in our collegial community that we're a part of. The Ethicsverse survey is live. Like I said, any feedback you have for us would be great. Check out us everywhere. So if you click this link, you'll be able to follow us on our YouTube channel, which is popping. Great clips on there, replays of the webinars, replays of the Ethicsverse webinars, replays of the Ethics Experts podcast are on there, all of our best clips. So follow us there. Follow us on LinkedIn as well, so you can stay in tune with upcoming events, you know, better clips and everything else. And also you can take a look at some of these great podcasts that are out. The Two Gurus Talk Compliance is one of my new favorites. Great Women in Compliance podcast is phenomenal. And of course, the award-winning Top 2% Global, round of applause for Ethico, Top 2% Global podcast, The Ethics Experts. We have Tyson Avery on. That episode should have just been released. You'll want to check that one out. He's phenomenal. It's coming out next week, so circle your calendars. It's coming out next week. FCPA Survival Guide is out. So me and Tom Fox did a 10-part series diving through all the takeaways from his book, the FCPA Survival Guide. So if you haven't picked that up, it's a great read, definitely worth the couple of dollar investment, and definitely worth checking out this podcast, which Tom liked so much he submitted it for an award. So Lord willing, fingers crossed, that will win. Okay, look at this ad. A round of applause. Okay, so we haven't had breakfast yet. Joe hasn't had breakfast yet. We need some more emojis. We live off emojis for this next hour. We have Ethicsverse Day coming up next month. Look at this phenomenal ad. Selena is a freaking genius. All right, Ethicsverse Day is coming up. It's $250 to come. It's a full day event. We have several different sessions with a bunch of thought leaders in the space. It's $250, free for Ethicsverse members. Little hack, don't tell anybody. It's free to sign up for the Ethicsverse. So you can come to this event for free if you are a member. Look at all these people who are coming. I mean, this is going to be phenomenal. We got Hugh Chen. We got Andrew McBride, who just won Compliance Week's Program of the Year for the work he did at Albemarle. Kenneth Polite is going to be there. Christy Grant Hart, Lisa Beth, Hema Lomax, Mel Sponholz, who is Mentor of the Year. So you are not going to want to miss this. July 18th, circle your calendars, call in sick. It's going to be a fun day. Ethico's ecosystem is our enterprise-wide disclosure management solution for people, ethics, and compliance solutions, ranging from case management, investigation management, corrective actions, disclosures, exit interviews, all the things that you need to gather the risk intelligence from across your organization so you can do your job. You can see we're highly ranked. Our entire tool set is informed by people on the front lines. We are not trying to sell software. We're trying to give away books and keep clients for a really long time. And we can only do that by providing phenomenal service and tools that actually work. So amazing. Imagine what Michelangelo would have made if he only had a spoon. Okay, he had a chisel. He had actual tools so he could build and release that David from the stone it was entrapped in. You can do magic things too when you have tools that actually work. We have also a year free if you're interested in that. We're giving away 5 books today. The one and only Dr. Joe Perez wrote this amazing book called The Madness Behind the Method. It's about taking training, mentoring techniques to really drive more effective employee engagement. And because we love you, we're giving away 5 of these. So let me make my introduction for myself. How's it going? Nick Gallo, Chief Servant, Co-CEO at Ethico. I got a new hat here, and you can see I'm getting some grays, but I like it. I like the look, and I'm still in my turtleneck era. The one and only Dr. Joe Perez. He is a senior systems analyst and team leader for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. He is a world-renowned speaker, does dozens of keynotes around the world, highly prolific thought leader in our space, 3-time best-selling author. So you can check out some more of his books. And yeah, he is a master storyteller. So Joe Perez, round of applause. Welcome, Dr. Joe. How's it going?
I'm doing all right, Nick. I hope you are too, sir.
I am, yeah. So, Joe, you have kind of become famous for being not only being a great speaker, for having your face up in New York, on the billboard in New York Times, but you've become really famous for the way that you talk about storytelling. And in our space, so much of our value, so much of our job is about conveying what we're doing when we're on the front lines and we're in the weeds, and conveying that to other stakeholders in the organization, whether it's other managers whose engagement we need in order to, echo our chorus across the organization, or whether it's leadership whose endorsement we need, either from a budget standpoint or just from a pat on the back standpoint to get the things done we need to get done. However, it seems like a lot of us kind of spin our wheels or struggle a bit in really conveying the story behind the numbers, or the story behind the story, in terms of what we're working on, in terms of where we are in our compliance journey. And so what I found is that a lot of folks struggle with data analysis. Any of these conferences I've been to over the last couple of years, the data analysis sessions are always packed, because I think it's something that people are really thirsty for, and it's a capability set that it's a muscle that we all want to build. So when you're looking at data analysis and you're looking at engaging an audience with data, you said something that, data is often perceived as dry and technical, but you figured out a way to kind of incorporate rhythm and rhyme as sort of foundational elements in our conveyance of our story. And so can you talk to us a little bit about this? I mean, this is kind of an unexpected parallel to talk about data, something really dry, objective, and music, something that's, soulful, something that animates us at such a human level.
Absolutely, Nick. Well, again, thank you for your most gracious introduction. Now, about musicality of data, Nick. Data analysis might seem inherently technical, but you know what? There's a hidden musicality, if you will, waiting to be discovered right there within the numbers, right in front of you. Just like music relies on the arrangement of notes to create rhythm and flow, data analysis hinges on identifying patterns and trends in your data sets. These patterns, like, the rise and fall of sales figures over time, or the repetition of certain customer demographics, creates a visual rhythm, if you will, in charts and graphs. Imagine, if you will, a stacked bar chart tracking website traffic across different days of the week. The consistent intervals between the bars and the distinct colors representing each day are going to establish some sort of rhythm. And this rhythm is going to guide the viewer's eyes, allowing them to easily compare the website traffic across different days and identify patterns. You see, Nick, I am a musician, okay? I've played the piano ever since I was a little child, and music has been a huge part of my life. So let me tell you, I know what I'm talking about. All right. Music is all about following patterns, rhythms, chords that resolve nicely at the end. Okay, well, I see data analytics in the same way. And I do believe my lifelong experience with music has helped me to be able to recognize patterns in data as well, just like there are patterns and rhythms in music. Okay, for instance, the cyclical nature of a long line chart follows the cyclical nature of the notes on a bass and treble clef when you put them together in a stanza of a song. Like stringing together a bunch of arpeggios from the woodwind section or the pianos, the punctuated bursts of an exploding pie chart reminds me of the syncopation of the what is it called? The percussion section, the staccato cadence of bar chords. Then when you put a whole bunch of graphs and narratives together into a data story, well, it's very much like a composer who's wrapping up her work or his work on a beautiful symphony, one that is for us to hear and enjoy. And just like a musical composition can evoke all kinds of emotions, Nick, so also can a great data analytics story. So then, by incorporating rhythm, we enhance the audience's experience, and it becomes easier to follow the flow of information, anticipate trends, and somehow grasp the overall story that data is telling.
So I love this analogy because I think there's so much that can be drawn from it. And I loved how you talked about, being a composer. I think a lot of us, and again, I'm not throwing stones at anybody on here because like I feel like this myself, like when I'm trying to pull stuff together for my quarterly board meetings, like this is an activity, this is a feeling that I think a lot of us have where it's like, how do I sort through all the crap I've been doing for the last 90 days and really like present something that's not just like from a defensive perspective to say like, look how busy I've been, I'm doing work, that's not what I'm in the position for. I'm in the position to say, here's what's going on. This is the story that's happening inside the organization. This is what we're facing. You know what I'm saying? Like there has to be a little bit more thought to it. Otherwise, you're just kind of, it's akin to basically getting the whole orchestra together and be like, all right, guys, start playing. And it's like, well, what are we playing?
Right. You
know what I'm saying? It's a total mess. If you sit back and think about yourself as a composer, that composer is sitting alone in a room with a bunch of blank song sheets and, a bunch of, blank music. What is it called? Song papers. And they are thinking about how they want this composition to move, how they want this piece of music to grow, and what emotional states they want the audience to be in at various points and how they want it to end. And I'm not saying that, we need to, turn into actual composers, but a little bit of thought prior to our presentation or prior to our symphony, as you would call it, about how these movements should look and where we want them to end from an emotional perspective. What emotional journey do we want them to take can do a lot to set us on a course to, again, pull out some of those stories that are really embedded in the data. Sheet music. Thank you, Rebecca. 1,000 points for Rebecca.
Sheet music.
Clearly, I'm not a music guy, Rebecca. Thank you very much.
It's all right. That's what it's called. Sheet music. Yeah.
Yeah. So music's about patterns. Data's about patterns. So how do we combine these two? Like I understand the concept for sure, but how do we start to combine these two to create a more impactful presentation? Is it simply, like I said, just kind of thinking a little bit from a composer's perspective of, hey, I just need to sit back with a blank sheet of paper to figure out what direction I want this to go? Or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that. It's called data storytelling for a reason, because you are telling a story. Now, we talked about rhyme. We talked about rhythm. Let's talk about how that rhythm translates into a story, because when you have a story, you have to have a plot. Okay, data story, just like any captivating narrative, needs a clear plot structure. Okay, the data is the protagonist on a journey, right? You got obstacles, turning points, and revelation at the end. All those things that are going to make a good story that you would read. All right. The individual components that are required for this great story, if you will, like a strong plot, well-developed characters, clear and engaging narratives, right? All these things are also relevant to the components that are required for effective data storytelling. So then, how does that apply? Well, in data storytelling, the plot, well, that's the underlying data and trends that are being analyzed, right? The characters, well, those are like the data points, the variables that are being studied. The narrative, well, that's the story behind the data that's being told using the data. So just like a great story needs to have that strong and compelling plot, the well-developed characters, the clear and engaging narrative to be effective, well, guess what? For data storytelling to be effective, it also requires a strong and compelling data set, well-defined variables, data points, and that same clear and engaging narrative of its own backing it up. Now, here's Here's what it might look like in practice, Nick. Okay, you have the beginning, right? Well, everybody starts at the beginning, right? So, you got to set the stage, right? Introducing the topic, establishing the context that's going to occur. What problem are you trying to solve, right? Why is the data important? Good to nail that kind of stuff down from the get-go. I mean, after all, aren't those the same kinds of questions that authors ask themselves when they're starting to work on a story, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
so then you have the middle, right? This is where the data takes center stage, if you will. Okay, you present your findings in a clear and concise way. You highlight clear trends and insights. Okay, this is where you would use the visuals. Yeah, the charts, the graphs, infographics, all those things that are going to support your narrative. And then finally, you have the end. All right. Don't just leave the audience hanging, right? Offer conclusions, recommendations, action items, a call to action and so forth. These things that would be based on the data insights, right? Leave your audience with a sense of takeaway and understanding, just in the same way that an author would do in a written story. Okay, visuals. Getting back to visuals. Visuals are the cornerstone of impactful data storytelling. They got to be clear, concise, aesthetically pleasing, and by all means, avoid overwhelming charts. It's going in the other extreme, right? Prioritize clean design principles. Okay, these visuals need to complement the narrative and not replace the narrative.
So that's a big point. They need to complement and not replace. And I think many times we try to err on the side of like completeness. So which means err on the side of more data, more details. And I've seen some of these pie charts that have, 50 slivers in it. And it's like, no one's going to read it. There's no value in it. And so I again think when you're making visuals, use that Pareto principle. What's the 80% of the story? Let's highlight that 80%. If you have to group more stuff into other, that's fine. There's a Pareto in that other. There's 80% of that other that's going to explain, most of that story of that other. But don't err on the side of completeness where it's going to be a ton of detail. Err on the side of completeness from a story perspective or from an understanding perspective. And that's going to give you a lot more freedom, to your point, Joe, to make those visuals more compelling, more visually compelling. Something else so we kind of talked about kind of an entire sort of story arc, and we want to be able to utilize some of these storytelling principles in our presentations. And what I think a lot of us fail to do that, Hollywood does a great job of is framing or setting the stage. So when you go to the movie theater to see a movie, you probably have seen a preview of that movie, and that preview really lets you know kind of what you're in store for. Is this an action movie? There's probably a bunch of explosions in the preview. You know what I'm saying? Like a bunch of the high point elements that you're going to see in that movie are captured in that short 90 seconds or 2-minute trailer. We also have that opportunity to create a trailer at the start of our presentation. And so just like, again, an action movie is going to start right off the bat with, the representation of the entire movie, right? Like the first five minutes of an action movie are usually like high action. Same thing with a romance movie, high emotionality, right? It really sort of sets that stage for the remainder. Feel free, feel equipped to pull forward how you want them to feel at the end. Pull forward what conclusion you want them to have before you even start the presentation. And what that's going to do is that's going to increase the odds that what you say is going to resonate with them, and they're going to be able to track with you a little bit more. Don't just kind of present the information and sort of sit back, cross your fingers, and hope that they do all that sort of mental calculus along the way and naturally arrive at that conclusion. Dumb it down and make it simple. And again, use those storytelling techniques to let them know where this story is going by bringing that forward at the front end of the conversation. One other thing I'd like to say, there's kind of a broad principle here, and we're going to be throughout this presentation providing examples of how we can bring these concepts down to earth and put them into practice in our next presentation, whether that's this afternoon or it's next week. And one thing I think is a good hack is to just recognize that we as human beings are built for story, right? There are, religions in antiquity that had no written word, and yet those axioms were passed down through oral tradition for generations and generations. We're built to retain story. We're built to resonate with those things, and stories can help deliver so much more information in a more efficient and effective way than just kind of presenting some, a list of data points or bullets. So the principle is to really 10x your storytelling. And what I mean is, any opportunity you have to tell a story, you should be telling it. So if there's we'll talk about this some more in a second, but I'd love for you to kind of, riff on this a little bit, Joe. Whenever I'm trying to tell stories constantly when I'm talking to the board. So if I see an anomaly, I will bring them on that journey and I will tell a story about what, we noticed this anomaly. We started to look under these rocks. We noticed this thing. We tested this hypothesis and we've kind of concluded that X, Y, and Z is happening. And here are the steps that we're taking. Helping them, follow me or follow us on this journey of discovery brings them into the picture a little bit more, helps them to see, along the way, what application of, logical frameworks that we utilize in order to arrive at those conclusions. And ultimately not only understand that journey a little bit more, but they can usually interact with it and collaborate on whatever problem we're talking about in a more meaningful way. So it just really drives a lot more attention and a lot more kind of engagement. What else would you say about this concept of, kind of sprinkling storytelling throughout our conversations, Joe?
Sure, that's an excellent concept that you bring up. We've already talked a little bit about music, right? And how it. But let me be clear, Nick. Music isn't only about rhythm. Okay, it's a journey of emotions. You brought that up, right? The data stories can leverage this power of emotion, as you indicated, incorporating elements like pacing. Okay, like music can either build up to a crescendo, or it slows down for emphasis. Okay, data stories can use that very same concept you were talking about, pacing, guide the audience's attention. Okay, the clear introduction builds suspense by, presenting key findings that you indicated, right? Conclude with a strong takeaway. That sounds kind of like the way we were talking about plot a few minutes ago. Okay, I'd say keep people in suspense too. Pose questions throughout the presentation, pique their curiosity. Keep them engaged throughout. Let the data build the case for itself, leading towards a conclusion or recommendation, that action call that I talked about earlier. Surprise. Okay, some unexpected finding, some counterintuitive data that you didn't see it coming, right? Similar, a surprise that comes, like a sudden key change in music or a sudden plot change in a story, I love doing that when I'm playing the piano. When they're singing and you accompany them singing, you throw everybody off with a key change, but the singer likes it because they can sing higher notes. But no, in the same way, this can jolt the audience's attention, right? Make them reevaluate whatever assumptions they might have had. And then there's climax and resolution, right? Just like a song or a story builds up to a climax and then resolves, well, then data presentations can create a similar emotional arc. Okay, highlight the most important findings, and then offer some solution or insights that provide a sense of closure. Just like the music doesn't leave you hanging, so also the story is not going to leave you hanging. So by incorporating these music-inspired techniques, if you will, Nick, data storytellers can create dynamic and engaging presentations that really, really, really resonate with the audience on an emotional level, like you talked about, right? Capitalize on that, okay? The data becomes part of a captivating experience and not just some dry report. Now, you want examples of that? I can give you some practical examples of that. Let's see. How about Little Red Riding Hood or Cinderella or
okay,
one of these. Let's say Snow White Let's go. Yeah, Little Red Riding. I think Little Red Riding Hood would work. Okay, there you go. Little Red Riding Hood. All right. So every good story has the setting, right? The pacing, if you will. So Little Red Riding Hood wants to see her grandma, right? And then you have the characters. At the very least, you got the protagonist, Little Red, the good person, the good one, right? She's okay. And then there's the antagonist. That's the bad character, the big bad wolf or something, right? He's the bad character. You have suspense. That's all part of the plot. Okay, and all the good plots are going to have that element of suspense. In this case, Wolf wants to eat Red. Okay, that's followed by the surprise. Hunter is there to confront the wolf. Didn't see that coming. And then you have the climax and resolution. Hunter kills Wolf. Red is safe, and everything's fine. They all lived happily ever after. Boom. That's it. Story told. Basic. Suspense, surprise, climax, resolution. You got all that stuff. Whatever else you add to it is just fluff. Gravy on the steak or the garnish or whatever. Now, in data storytelling, how does this apply? Well, you have the setting and the pacing, right? Little Red CEO wants to see how her grandma cookie sales are going. Okay, you have characters. That's the board of directors, right? You have the plot, elements of suspense, right? Board of directors wants to see an improvement in grandma cookie sales, while the big bad wolf, the big bad competition hovers over them, wanting to eat Red. What's the surprise? Well, the directors aren't happy with Little Red CEO, okay? And then there's the conflict. That's when, say, the big bad competition wants to eat Little Red CEO. And the resolution, well, that's where data analyst, the hunter, kills your fear of the competition by showing that grandma cookie sales are actually going through the roof. The end. They all lived happily ever after, right? And what did you do? Well, you used those same elements that I talked about. Pacing, suspense, surprise, climax, and resolution, all in a practical example that hopefully makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, it does. That's a good example. Love that story, Little Red Riding Hood. My gosh. Good thing that Hunter was there.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Krista that I want to get to in a second, but
Sure.
We go through that story arc you just talked about kind of every day at work. You get a notification about something going wrong. There's your surprise. You start looking into it. There's all this anxiety, right? Like you're trying to assess the problem. You figure out a solution to the problem. Okay, you put the fire out. There's your resolution. I'm just saying these stories are happening all the time. We just have to open our eyes to them and start kind of feeling comfortable to sprinkle them in. So that's kind of my frame for Krista's. Hey, Krista, how's it going? Great question here. Sometimes I feel like I can't read German, so I don't know what to say there. Sometimes I feel like
Ich bin ein Amerikaner.
Okay. Required to put together stories even when I've just told a really good one last month. What are your best tips to keep data presentations when there's no new exciting story forthcoming and you're running out of ideas? So I'm going to give a quick answer while you're thinking about it. I think pastors have done this for years where they can just grab an anecdote and use that to tie to the story. So you can really start to grab stories anywhere. You can get them from Reader's Digest if you can still find one of those. But there's probably anecdotal stories within your organization. Somebody on your team, again, if there's, if we're talking about speak up trends, for example, I'm sure there's somebody from that investigation or, from that pool of investigation whose story you can kind of tell, at least at an anecdotal, blinded, high level, to incorporate some of that emotion. Again, why are we talking about storytelling? We're talking about trying to retain people's attention. So music keeps people's attention. Stories keep people's attention. How? Because there's some emotionality in there. And we are all going through these emotional arcs every single day when we're trying to do our job. We have a high anxiety from an alert that just happened or something that we're worried about, and we find resolutions to those things. So I'm just saying, incorporating some of that emotionality that those emotional waves that you are riding or that somebody who's attached to the data set that you're explaining is riding just helps to put it in perspective and just anchors these numbers on the screen down to something human that allows people to connect and relate. what would you add to that? I don't know if I even answered your question,
Yeah.
Krista, but Joe will, I promise.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, that's an excellent answer. Nick, you're a genius, man. That was very, very
Well, thank you.
very well said.
You're always
The
welcome
couple,
as long as you keep with this kind of commentary is great.
yeah, what can I say? You know, I mean, he did not give me any money to say those things. Full disclosure, guys. All right. So when you're talking about the numbers on the page, okay, that's relevance. Relevance speaks to the mind and indicates the what and possibly even the how as well. The story behind the numbers, that's the resonance. Resonance speaks to the heart and tells the why. Okay, if you can achieve both relevance and resonance, when you involve both the mind and the heart, well, then you're golden. Okay, because it's it's with the mind that we make intellectual decisions. It's with the heart that we think about the emotional ramifications behind those decisions.
It's how we connect to things.
Yes, exactly. Right. It is how we connect to things. And insofar as finding oh, good heavens, there's all kinds of things that you can pull from history. You can pull from everyday occurrences. I pull stories from. I pulled a story from a mushroom burger that I ate when my wife took me out to dinner for my birthday a few months ago. I mean, I've got videos about that on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, maybe if we run long, you can tell that story at the end here.
Yeah, that's right. When we went up to Pikes Peak when I was in Denver, my wife and I took a couple of snack bags with us. And you know how it is when you buy a snack bag at the grocery store, it's only like half full. You look at it and say, man, there's like 4 potato chips in this thing. I paid $2 for this and I got 4 potato chips. So we get to the top of Pikes Peak and we get our snacks out, and both the bags were filled to overflowing because of the altitude change. They were about to explode. They were inflated like balloons. And that gave me an awesome idea. So I got out my camera, I got out the 2 potato chip bags, and I said, have you ever had issues with numbers being inflated with your data? Well, this is what happens when you take a bag of potato chips up to the top of Pikes Peak. Don't inflate your numbers. Let your data speak for itself. You see what happens to the bag? Well, see what happens to your credibility when you don't let the data speak for itself. And I went on and on, probably about 30, 45. I'm going to publish that video. The idea is always be on the lookout for not only the anecdotal things that may happen, but also look for opportunities to tell stories from everyday object lessons, whether it be a mushroom burger or a bag exploding. Yeah, any angle. That's right.
Just think of the angle. What is our goal? Our goal is to be able to convey where we're at in our compliance journey. Our goal is to maintain authentic attention with the audience so that we can get their engagement, we can get their endorsement. So again, that can come from a bunch of different things. They can be stories from history. They can be anecdotal stories from somebody within the team. It could be your own story of how you uncovered this issue, or I was really worried when I saw this. I looked into it. I realized it was this thing, and this is how I fixed it, and now I'm sleeping well at night. Again, a little bit of an arc there peppered throughout is going to keep your conversation a lot more resonant. It's going to humanize this function that in many cases folks have a hard time like wrapping their head around, not only like what it's doing, but what the upside potential of it is. And so the more we can humanize it, that's how we can really fast forward or, kind of teleport to the light bulb turning on over their head for them to say, oh, wow, this is something that I haven't really seen before. I haven't really appreciated the opportunity that we have here. That's where we're trying to get to. And so these are just little hacks for us to be more engaging, for us to for us to communicate the data in a way that's going to be more resonant and it's going to be more impactful at the end of the day.
Absolutely, Nick. Again, the relevance and resonance, the two go hand in hand. And if you can make an emotional impact while you're doing that, you have a greater possibility that the individuals are going to take ownership. You take ownership in something that you can relate to. You take ownership into something that makes an emotional connection with you. And you can't do that with just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's just rows and columns, but look at the stories behind them. Look at some connection that you can make, And yeah, absolutely. You achieve the relevance, resonance both, make that emotional connection. Your people take ownership. And as you so aptly and eloquently said, you can sleep better at night.
So Kay said, okay, the quote unquote characters may be the KPIs in my data story. I think they can be. The character could also be some faceless person who's, again, I'm just kind of thinking speak up, but like who's going through the speak up program, right? Who's going through an investigation process, right? Like you can anthropomorphize your KPI if you want, just like they did on School of Rock with that bill, right? Like they anthropomorphized the bill and now everybody knows how a bill is passed, right? Like use whatever you can to bring your story to life, and it's going to be a lot more resonant. I mean, listen to Wendy. Hey, Wendy, how's it going? Wendy says, I use stories modified from TV shows all the time. Superstore, Veronica Mars, all sorts of shows have ethics and compliance stories within them. There's hundreds of movies. There's, I mean, again, there's things we can pull from fairy tales. The point is we need to elevate these numbers on the screen into what's actually happening. Any of those numbers are a representation of a bunch of human beings' activities. So pulling some of the humanism out of those, composite activities and bringing those to bear can help people really understand what's going on below the surface. Because again, I just can't say this enough because I'm constantly reminded of it. It's so easy to forget that the folks at the board level or even at the leadership level, they're just not on the front lines. They're not in the weeds. So they many times don't have that context, that like instinctual foundational context that you automatically have. Right. They can't do that calculus then as quickly. You can look at two numbers, two compliance metrics or two HR metrics, and you can say, okay, I kind of know what that story is there because you're so intimate with them. A lot of these folks are not that intimate with it because they're at such a higher level. So do that work for them, cut the meat into smaller pieces so it's easier for them to chew, and they're going to be satiated and dialed in and understand what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. So I like that. Cut the meat.
So
yeah.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead. I sorry.
No. That's all right. I was simply agreeing with you. Cut the meat for them. They're not always going to be able to cut it themselves because they have more of a strategic view. You might have more of a tactical view, right? The strategic view from 10,000 feet, the overall strategy, the big picture. You might have an operational view, the day-to-day steps, but we realize that those day-to-day steps are what it takes to implement that overall strategic view, right? You cannot have an effective strategy without effective tactics. And if you can somehow make those tactics known in a way that's palatable to the ones that are more interested in the strategy, then of course, again, you will awaken that innate desire to make things happen in the company, right? Bringing the data to life, as it were, and allowing them to take ownership and be able to make those informed decisions that you wanted to make, all because you took the time to cut the steak. I like that analogy, Nick. Well said.
Thank you. So Wendy went on to say, this is what you get from Wendy every time she drops some pearls in here. Some of my favorites came from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I wrote an article about it years ago for Ethico, not this Ethico, a different one, Ethico magazine from SCCE. It mentioned a few points, but the main point was speaking up against your friends when they violate the rules. Would you do it? That takes courage. The show Psych, one of my other favorites, is riddled with good stuff in every episode. Also fun to quote the show. So again, like, we don't get bonus points in this life for reinventing the wheel. So don't reinvent the wheel. If there is an emotional package already there with, the Sorcerer's Stone, tap into that and reference that as a picture or as a parable for the point that you're trying to get across. These connections are already made in known existing stories. Pulling those in as reference points can create a ton of leverage for you, not only to convey your point in a more clear way, but to maintain more attention, bring that novelty, and really humanize what you're talking about. So we talked about how data analysis often deals with these really complex topics. So how can we use, in data storytelling, how can we utilize rhyme, quote unquote, to create better connections between the data and their audience's existing knowledge? And how is this going to help them benefit in terms of like better information retention? Mm-hmm. How do we really start to play with this concept of rhyme a little bit more to make our messaging more impactful and more memorable?
And thank you, Nick. You already kind of hinted around to it while we were talking about making those connections. Rhyme in data storytelling is not what you think. Okay, it goes beyond mere wordplay. It can be some of that. It's about creating connections and fostering memorability. Powerful ways that you can make data rhyme, if you will, with the audience's understanding. Y'all will see what I mean. Okay, first, analogies and comparisons. Relate complex data points to familiar concepts or objects like we've been talking about. Example, comparing website traffic growth to a population boom. All right, that helps the audience to grasp the scale of the increase. All right, this creates a rhyme in their head between the unfamiliar data and the familiar concept, making it easier to understand, making that connection. Secondly, describe patterns or trends using, say, metaphors or similes. Okay, imagine comparing companies' stock price fluctuations over time to, say, the rhythm of an ocean tide. Okay, this rhyme, if you will, creates a vivid mental picture, and that aids in information retention. How about humor and satire? Okay, that's another tactic. All right, a well-placed joke or some satirical image can lighten the mood and make the data more memorable, as long as it's not a dad joke. All right, humor serves as a rhyme that captures the audience's attention and helps them to connect with the information on a deeper level. By using these techniques, Nick, data storytellers can transform complex data into relatable concepts. That's what it's all about. Make it relatable, right? The data rhymes with the audience's existing knowledge, making it easier to understand and retain the information presented. It's like you're cutting that steak, as you've put. One powerful example comes from the New York Times. I found this. Oh my gosh, it's an interactive piece that's called "Can You Live on the Minimum Wage?" It was an article that was presented, and in
The
it,
answer's
it
no.
had I beg your pardon?
The answer is no. Please keep going.
Right. Yeah, the answer is no. Right. We already know that the answer is no, and it's assumed that the answer is no, but it does a very vivid job exploring it allows people to explore the hard choices faced by individuals that are living on the smallest paycheck. Several different things that you can, sliders that you can change. The thing is 10 years old, and to this day, it's still quite stunning, really, through user choices and, a surprisingly simple design and interface that has stood the test of time, 10 years. The story conveys a clear message. As you said, living on minimum wage is incredibly challenging. Actually, it's impossible. The calculator does quickly reveal the answer is no, just like you said. It isn't just challenging, it's impossible, right? It's even more dramatic now, 10 years later, when numbers have gotten even bigger. So, this
right.
approach, Nick, it demonstrates how data storytelling can engage readers by involving them directly in the narrative. Right? Instead of just spouting off dry statistics, this New York Times web article combines user interaction, clear design, and a compelling message to create an impactful data story. Yeah, right. When was the last time that you used a calculator that was 10 years old that you found on the web to ignite your mind and spark revelation? Doesn't happen very often.
But it's there for you,
Yeah.
Kevin said a film score. So I just want to go back to this concept of rhyme, because I just want to make sure everybody understands this. We're not saying that every single, every couplet should be like rhyming. We're not saying to do your presentation in rhyming couplets unless you want to. I mean, maybe that's a cool, novel way to present. But Kevin said a film score consists of many sub-themes, but the composer drafts a signature soundtrack as the hook for the whole film. So you hear that at the introduction, and then you hear traces of that main soundtrack, that main theme throughout the different scenes and different sort of examples of those. And again, that theme is introduced in the beginning, right? And on those opening credits, you hear this initial theme, and then you hear quote unquote rhymes of that theme throughout. And that's that sort of common thread that kind of as part of the cohesion of an entire movie, right? Like that film score kind of pulls it all
Absolutely.
together. So
40
how can we
years,
leverage
40 years, no, 50 years. You even to this day, forgive me for interrupting. The only one thing, all I have to do is say this, and everybody will know what I'm talking about. Dum 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 da dum dum da dum. Right, 50 years
Jaws.
later, and everybody,
I'm
Darth
kidding.
Vader. That's the first thing that pops into your head. Just those few notes, right?
Yeah,
So
immediately.
continue
And
with
again,
your thought.
all of that emotion, right? There's a, it's not just the image, it's the emotionality around that image. When you saw him for the first time coming through and the door open and all that kind of stuff, right? So how can we borrow those kinds of things? And what I really want to talk about from this rhyme thing, because I think this is so powerful. A rhyme is just something that keeps people's attention, right? You can learn songs due to that rhyme because there's this anchor point and you know what's going to hit. And I'm saying that technique, that capability is available to us in our presentations if we can use that introduction piece to introduce whatever the rhyme is, tell them where we want them to go, or tell them what their conclusion is going to be by the end of this 5-minute, 10-minute presentation, and then incorporate those ups and downs throughout it so that they do in fact arrive there. This rhyming thing is really just about breaking the pattern and maintaining attention. And one other point I want to make is this is not like some kind of a crazy concept. Like just because the word data is in this title doesn't mean that it's like this scary thing. We're just talking about communicating. And like every single person on here has a whole bouquet of people, an orbit of people that are in their social circle, in their familial circle, and all these kinds of things that we connect with all the time. And we go on vacation and we tell stories about that vacation, or you had a bad weekend and you tell them about what happened in that weekend. Those are very rarely like a newscast where you're just talking about the facts. No, you're incorporating your frustration and getting stuck in traffic, or whatever emotional state you were in during that story. We tend to easily convey that in our personal lives, right, outside of work. And I'm just saying, bring a modicum of that into the boardroom or into your other presentation. Bring a modicum of that humanity that is your main currency to connect with people outside of work to those presentations, and just watch how it resonates so much more. We are all built for this. We all have this in us. We're not trying to teach you kind of a new language here. We're just saying, hey, that normal language that you use in all parts of your life, bring that into this presentation as well, because that's what's going to make you more resonant. That's what's going to make you more persuasive. Not having a tighter tie with a double Windsor knot and having all your slides memorized. That's not what's persuasive. That's not what people connect to. You know what I'm saying? That's a half Windsor, so that was not a dig at you. Okay.
No, this is only a half Windsor. That's right.
Yeah,
you got to have, people's got to just go ahead and do it, as one of my famous friends used to say, do or do not. There is no try.
See, this is why he's top rated. You understand what I'm saying? I knew this was going to come. Okay. I got a couple more questions from the chat that I'm going to grab here, but we talked about plot structure and visuals. How do we start to weave these things together? We started in the beginning talking about how a composer can sort of weave these different emotions and these different movements to create an entire cohesive composition. How can we start to weave together these plot structures, or weave together this story using these data elements and using this rhyme to drive this impact that we've been alluding to?
That's an excellent question, Nick. Putting it all together, my friend. Okay. Creating a cohesive data story, right, involves, as you said, weaving all these key elements together that we've talked about, many of them that we've talked about. And I guess I'm going to try to glean it all together, put it into one big ball for you, okay? Right. First, strong narrative, okay? Develop a clear storyline, right? What we talked about, beginning, middle, and end, the parts of the plot that we talked about. This narrative needs to guide the audience through the data, like that score that we talked about, highlighting key insights and conclusions. All right. Then there's the data visualizations, right? Using those visuals that we talked about. Use it strategically, supporting the narrative, making the data more accessible, the visual cues, right? They got to be clear, they got to be concise, and they have to be visually appealing. Okay. We are visual creatures. Third, audience engagement. Consider the people that are watching, know them, understand who you're talking to, the cutting of the meat that you mentioned. Are you talking to people that are way up in the echelons, or are you talking to people who are your peers, or whatever? Use that knowledge and tailor the story accordingly, using language that they can understand, and address their specific interests and needs and wants and so forth. Finally, you got to have a call to action. I cannot stress that enough. Don't just present the data, right? Inspire action. What am I going to do with? Okay, this is pretty, but what do I do with this, right? Conclude with that call to action so they know what to do. Encourage the audience to utilize the insights that you've presented, the do or do not part, right? So I'm convinced, Nick, by combining these elements, data storytellers can create a cohesive and impactful data story that not only informs but also resonates with the audience, like we talked about before, right? The data becomes a powerful tool for driving change and achieving whatever the outcomes that you want, right? In a recent Harvard Business Review article, Paul Zak explores how data storytelling impacts our brains. Okay, when we hear just straight facts, two areas of our brains light up, and that's the language processing and the comprehension. However, when we listen to stories, neural activity increases 500%, according to his research. Serious. Storytelling, for instance, engages the brain's motor cortex, allowing us to simulate the experiences that are being described in the narrative that we're listening to. Okay. Emotional and visual processing centers come alive when they're stimulated during that storytelling. That enhances our connection to the content. Okay. All this increased brain activity during storytelling translates into better retention of the information, thus making the data more memorable and, well, relatable too. So the next time you're sharing data, Nick, I can't talk. Weave it into a compelling story that has to resonate with your audience, just like you've been talking about.
So Kevin said something else smart. Kevin's on fire today. That is the foundation on which your story is based. Without the data, it's only he said, she said, they said scenario. Correct.
Wow.
Okay. What is like an epidemic? It's like gossip, right? Like everyone loves to gossip. They like to have these conversations about this thing that happened. There's very rarely data in those conversations. It's all he said, she said. And guess what? Everyone remembers those little gossip stories, right?
And each one remembers it a little differently too.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's in everyone's mind. It's simple. They're simple stories. Oh my gosh, did you see his hat? Oh my gosh, did you hear what she said in the meeting? Right? Like people remember those kinds of things. And all I'm saying is like use data as an anchor point for those kinds of things that if we can incorporate that storytelling, they're just more likely to remember them. To your point and to Kevin's point, wrapping some story around the data is going to just make it so much more memorable.
Absolutely. So giving credence to the pieces of information that you were trying to convey.
All right, and I'm going to tell you guys a little story that is going to sound insane and probably stupid, and none of you are going to do it, but I would highly recommend doing it because it's changed a lot for me. So 2 board meetings ago, I was kind of struggling with this issue that I've kind of alluded to, where it's like, man, I can't sort of like bring this together, and I feel like I'm in too much detail. So I literally put my slides together, and this is so stupid. I sat down my son, who's 11, and my daughter, who's 8, and I walked them through it. And like, there were certain points where they were like, is that bad? And I was like, okay, well, I clearly didn't specify enough that this was a good or a bad thing. And I'm just saying, like, bouncing it off of them where they have no context caused me to like really, I don't want to say dumb it down because my children are geniuses. They have the best children, as you may have heard.
Of course they are.
But like,
and I have.
It helped me dumb it down and be way more clear. It helped uncover the instances in my presentation where I was relying on too much like implication or too much context to force me to like spell it out a little bit more. And again, it worked so well. I did it again on the last meeting, and it really has helped to make sure that I'm going high level enough, and I'm conveying the shape of the story and what I want to convey in a more clear way. Again, I know it sounds stupid to present your board slides or whatever to your kids, but I'm just saying, like, it was like tabula rasa. They had no context for anything, and it really helped show me what some of the rough spots on my presentation were.
Sure, the best way to challenge assumptions is to not make them. And the best way to mitigate bias is to present them to somebody that doesn't have any. Okay. And you accomplished both of those things. Children bring a unique perspective, right? They are not already clouded or colored or biased, if you will, by some preconceived notion. And when you can take care of that from the get-go, and remove the things that you don't know. Your assumptions may be going a certain way, but you don't know what other people's assumptions are going to be.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So
Right.
that's the best thing. The best way to deal with an assumption is not to make one in the first place, or to present it in a way that other people can shoot it down.
So I want to talk a little bit, we're kind of wrapping up here. If you guys have any more questions or tips, please go ahead and drop those in. Kevin just said, please note data maps to information, and this is great, and information maps to knowledge. The story is at the information stage and the action is at the knowledge stage. Exactly.
Ooh,
Did you guys follow that?
I love that.
That story is going to carry you through and allow them to acquire that knowledge, so that action that you're prompting them to take makes sense in terms of context, and also is mobilizing or animating in terms of the action you want them to take. That's a great point, Kevin.
Absolutely.
So everybody's saying my kids should get paid. They get paid with love. They get paid with dinners. Okay, dinner. They also get paid with, a roof. You know what I mean?
Yeah, free room and board, free food, protection, guidance, mentoring.
You just have to listen to Dad's presentation every 90 days. That's pretty low. That's a pretty low ask.
That's a low. Yeah, you've set the bar pretty low.
So, pulling it together, we talked about captivate, cultivate, calculate, and illuminate. Help us understand this kind of last hack, this like alliteration hack, and how we might be able to leverage that a little bit more.
I love it. Nick, I appreciate you bringing it up. I can definitely do that. Okay. The power of rhythm, rhyme, and rhetoric. Talk about more alliteration here, right? It isn't limited to data storytelling alone. Did you know you can leverage these elements to make your everyday communication, make it more engaging, make it more impactful? And I'll give you those tips that you were asking for. Okay. Rhythm. Speak with variety. Avoid monotone delivery. Okay. Vary your pace, your volume, your inflection to create a natural rhythm, if you will, that keeps your listeners engaged. Okay. Use strategic pauses. Believe it or not, pauses can emphasize important points and allow your audience to absorb the information. They also create a sense of anticipation. You're keeping them hooked on what's he going to say next because he paused, right? Rhyme. I think beyond literal rhymes, like we did a few minutes ago. I defined that. Wordplay is fun. I do it all the time, but the real rhyme is creating connections, making it memorable. Use repetition of key phrases or ideas, like that musical score through the movie, right, to create a sense of rhyme that reinforces your message. Excuse me. The rule of threes I've used. Okay, it's very effective in storytelling and communication. And no, I'm not talking about the three things. Be brief, be bold, be brief, be brilliant, be gone. I mean, that's good. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But no. Arrange your points in groups of three is what I'm talking about. Doing this creates a rhythm that makes it easier to remember, right? So we've gone through rhythm, we've gone through rhyme, and now rhetoric. Okay, with rhetoric, focus on your audience. Tailor your language to your audience's needs and to their interests. Use clear and concise language that they can understand, like we've been talking about. Okay, tell those stories, right? We've talked about stories being powerful tools that connect with your audience. We've seen that. We've heard it. Personal anecdotes, relevant examples, everyday object lessons, like we've talked about. The inflated bags, right? Make it more relatable, more impactful. Ask questions. Engage your audience, right? Posing questions throughout your communication. Get them to talk to you. at the end of each of the points, maybe ask them, what did I just say? What was that point? Do you remember? How does this apply to you? Encourages active listening and encourages that sense of dialogue. Okay, here's what it all boils down to, Nick. If you can take a boring report about a line graph showing, I don't know, the cookie sales we were talking about, right? And somehow weave it into a relevant, resonant narrative with a human interest story behind it that will resonate with your stakeholders or board of directors or your kids or, whoever, right? Giving them something about which they're passionate. Do you know what you will have done at that point? You will have captured their attention, kept their interest, addressed their concerns, and exceeded their expectations. Now, isn't that what a good story is supposed to do anyway, right? Okay, you have two major objectives. First, you got to incorporate that relevant narrative with a resonant theme, okay? So what do you have? Relevance and resonance, like we've been talking about. To review, resonance speaks to the mind, tells them the what. Resonance speaks to the heart and gives them the why, okay?
The why.
Lastly, that's right, leave them with a positive takeaway by doing those four things that I mentioned. Again, I try to do it every time I tell a story, every time I speak, every time I write, whether it's a book or an article, whatever. What do? Again, capture their attention, keep their interest, address their concerns, and exceed their expectations. And putting it another way, that rhyme that you were talking about, easier to remember these four words, okay? Captivate, cultivate, calculate, and illuminate. And you got to love it. Right? So by incorporating these tips, Nick, do you know what you're going to do? You are going to transform your everyday communication from flat and forgettable to captivating and memorable. That's what you want to do. The power of rhythm, rhyme, and rhetoric in our data storytelling, or any other kind of storytelling for that matter, lies in our ability to connect with our audience on a deeper level, ensuring that our message resonates long after the conversation is over.
I love it. Well, I feel illuminated, and I definitely feel captivated. So really great conversation. Round of applause for Dr. Joe Perez. Hope you check out his book if you didn't win. Next week, we got a real treat for you. Navigating the Boardroom, Insider Secrets for Ethics and Compliance in HR. We got the one and only Matt Kelly hosting. We got Tamisha. We got Judy. We got a whole panel for you. So we're going to have a great session next week about really navigating the boardroom in a more effective way. You can see where we're kind of pivoting. We're pivoting into a lot of this. How do we communicate better? How do we resonate more with our audience? We can't do our job unless we get the participation of our stakeholders, whether that's the employee base, whether it's the other middle managers, or it's the leaders whose endorsement we need to do our job. So we hope you found this valuable. We take very serious the hour you spend with us. Like I said, join us next week for the coolest place to be. One more round of applause for Dr. Joe. I think we broke 2,000 emojis today. I think this was a home run. We did it.
It was an honor to be on your program. Thank you so much.
Love you all. We'll see you next week. See you, Dr. Joe.
Take care.